At our 5th anniversary party in my penthouse, my billionaire husband stood beside a woman I'd never met and announced he was finally upgrading to someone worthy of this lifestyle. The room erupted in congratulations. I smiled, reached into my purse, and pulled out eviction papers. Funny, I said. Because neither of you lives here anymore. What happened next turned his victory celebration into the most expensive mistake of his life. I'm standing in my own living room watching 50 people celebrate what they think is my husband's moment of triumph. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're a subscriber, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The wall of windows behind me overlooks the city, 23 floors of glass and steel separating us from the ordinary world below. My penthouse. The one my grandmother left me when I turned 26. Parker's been living here for 6 years, and somewhere along the way, he forgot it was never his. Parker's in the center of the room wearing a Tom Ford suit I bought him last Christmas, one hand holding champagne, the other resting possessively on the shoulder of a blonde woman in a red dress that probably costs more than most people's monthly rent. Her name is Sienna Michaels. I know this because I've spent the last 3 months learning everything about her. The caterers Parker hired are circulating with appetizers that cost $400 per person. The champagne flowing freely is from my wine collection, the one I started before I ever met him. The jazz quartet playing softly in the corner is apparently his anniversary gift to himself. None of this was planned with me. None of this was for me. Can I have everyone's attention? Parker's voice cuts through the conversation. The room goes quiet. 50 faces turn toward him, his business partners, his investors, people from his tech company, a few mutual friends who are about to learn whose side they need to choose. I'm standing near the kitchen, holding a glass of champagne I haven't touched. My sister Kate is beside me, phone positioned casually on the counter, already recording. My attorney Monica Booth is somewhere near the terrace doors, looking like just another guest in her elegant navy dress. Parker clears his throat, and I recognize that expression. It's the one he wears when he's about to close a deal, when he's certain he's the smartest person in the room. Thank you all for celebrating with us tonight, he begins. 5 years ago, I made a commitment. Tonight, I want to be honest about where that commitment has brought me. My heart is steady. My hands aren't shaking. I've rehearsed this moment in my mind 1,000 times over the past 3 months. Marriage teaches you what you really need, Parker continues, looking directly at me across the room. What you're willing to settle for versus what you actually deserve. His words are careful, practiced. This is a speech he's prepared. Carrie has been comfortable. Safe. The kind of wife who keeps the home running while you build an empire. A few people shift uncomfortably. They can sense something wrong in his tone, in the way he's describing his wife at their anniversary party. But I've outgrown comfortable, he says, and his hand tightens on Sienna's shoulder. My company just hit $1 billion valuation. I'm moving in different circles now. I need a partner who matches where I am, not where I was. Sienna is smiling. She actually thinks this is romantic. Parker reaches into his jacket and pulls out a manila envelope. He walks across my living room, past the furniture I selected, over the rug I chose, beneath the chandelier I had installed, and places the envelope on the marble counter in front of me. Divorce papers, he announces to the room. Already filed, already processed. I'm done settling, Carrie. You should find someone more, your speed. Someone who doesn't need the kind of life I can provide. The room erupts. Not in gasps of horror, but in supportive murmurs, even a few scattered laughs. His business partner actually claps him on the shoulder. Sienna is beaming like she just won a prize. This is the moment Parker has been planning. His grand declaration. His public claim to a better future with a woman he thinks is more deserving of his success. He's even chosen the location carefully, my penthouse, with its $1 million view and its evidence of wealth, to prove he's become someone who needs more than what I am. What he doesn't know is that this penthouse isn't a symbol of our success. It's mine. Legally, solely, completely mine. The deed has only ever had one name on it, Carrie Walker. What he doesn't know is that I've been expecting exactly this for 3 months. What he doesn't know is that while he was planning his exit, I was building his destruction. I look at the divorce papers. I look at Parker's triumphant face. I look at Sienna standing there like she's won something valuable. Then I smile. But to understand why I'm smiling while my husband announces our divorce to 50 witnesses, you need to know how this all started. 8 years ago, I met Parker St. George at a charity gala in Manhattan. I was 25, working as a brand strategist for a boutique consulting firm, and I'd only attended because my boss needed someone to represent the company at the last minute. Parker was 29, giving a presentation about his startup, some kind of tech platform that was supposed to revolutionize how small businesses managed their finances. He was magnetic. Not just attractive, though he was that too, tall, dark hair, the kind of smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. But it was the way he talked about building something from nothing, about having this vision that everyone else thought was impossible. He spoke about the future like it was something he could personally architect. We got coffee after his presentation. Then dinner 2 days later. By the end of that month, we were inseparable. I fell hard. The kind of falling where you ignore every warning sign because you're too busy being intoxicated by possibility. Parker was ambitious, driven, constantly working on his startup with the kind of intensity that made you believe he could actually pull it off. And he made me feel essential to that dream. He'd show me pitch decks at midnight, asking for my opinion. He'd practice presentations in my apartment, letting me critique his delivery. You get it, he used to say. Everyone else sees the obstacles. You see the vision. When my grandmother died 6 months into our relationship, I inherited her penthouse. 23 floors above the city, panoramic views, the kind of place you see in magazines and assume is digitally enhanced. My grandmother had been a fashion designer who'd made smart investments in Manhattan real estate back in the 70s. The penthouse was her crown jewel, and she left it to me because, as she wrote in her letter, "You're the only one who understands that wealth isn't about impressing people, it's about freedom." Parker moved in 3 months later. I never asked him to sign anything. Never thought to protect what was mine because I genuinely believed we were building something together. He talked about our place and our future, and I just let him. It felt romantic, this idea of sharing everything. When he proposed a year later on the terrace at sunset, I said yes before he even finished the question. The ring was modest, he was pouring everything into his startup, but I didn't care. I thought we were a team. I threw myself into supporting his dream completely. I introduced him to every contact I had from my consulting work, CEOs, venture capitalists, marketing directors who trusted my judgment enough to take meetings based solely on my recommendation. Those introductions led to his first major funding round. $3 million from investors who believed in Parker's vision because I'd vouched for his credibility. I helped him refine his pitch decks, spending weekends restructuring presentations until they were perfect. I attended every investor meeting, every networking event, playing the role of supportive partner while making sure the right people knew Parker was someone worth betting on. When his company finally launched, I took on everything else. Groceries, bills, maintenance, the endless coordination that keeps a life running. I hosted dinners where Parker could close deals. I made small talk with investors' wives while he worked the room. I turned our home into the kind of place that made people think, this guy has it together. This guy is worth the risk. And it worked. Parker's company grew. His reputation solidified. Our life looked perfect. He just forgot who'd built the foundation he was standing on. I supported every late night at the office, every risky pivot that made our financial situation precarious, every decision that required one of us to sacrifice so the other could advance. I told myself this was partnership. That my contributions were building our future together, even if Parker's name was on the company incorporation papers and the press releases. The penthouse became my project. I decorated it carefully, not just to my taste, but strategically. Every piece of furniture, every art selection, every design choice communicated success and stability. The kind of home that made investors think Parker St. George was someone who had his life together, Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Someone who could be trusted with their money. I took pride in creating that environment. I believed I was contributing to our shared success in ways that mattered, even if they weren't publicly acknowledged. Looking back from this moment, standing in my living room with divorce papers on the counter and my husband's mistress smiling beside him, I can see how thoroughly I deceived myself. I'd been so focused on being supportive, on being the kind of partner who enabled her husband's ambitions, that I never questioned whether Parker valued what I was building. Whether he saw my contributions as partnership or simply as the expected cost of being married to someone destined for greater things. The wedding happened 5 years ago. Small ceremony, intimate reception, just family and close friends. I kept my name, Walker, because my grandmother's legacy meant something to me. Parker said he understood, that he respected my independence. Looking back, I wonder if he resented it. If keeping my own name was the first sign I wasn't fully committed to his vision of our future. The shift started about 2 years ago, so gradually that I convinced myself I was imagining problems that didn't exist. Parker's company had just secured Series B funding, $15 million that valued his startup at $75 million. It was the breakthrough he'd been working toward for 4 years. I'd connected him with 2 of the lead investors through my network. One was a former client of mine who trusted my judgment on emerging tech. The other was someone I'd met at a consulting conference who I'd stayed in touch with specifically because I knew Parker would eventually need that connection. The funding should have brought us closer. Instead, it created distance. He started staying later at the office. Coming home after midnight with explanations about term sheet negotiations and due diligence meetings. When I asked about his day, hoping to maintain some connection to the business we were supposedly building together, his answers got shorter. Less detailed. Like he was editing information rather than sharing his life with me. "It's just complicated right now," he'd say, already scrolling through his phone. Lots of moving parts. His phone became permanently attached to his hand. Always face down on every surface. Always locked with a password I didn't know and had never needed to ask for before. When notifications came through during dinner, the rare dinners we still had together, he'd glance at the screen and smile in a way that suggested whoever was texting him was more interesting than our conversation. Our conversations shrank to pure logistics. Who was picking up dry cleaning? When the building's annual assessment was due. Whether we needed to schedule maintenance for the HVAC system. The emotional intimacy that had characterized our early years disappeared entirely, replaced by the kind of polite distance you'd maintain with a roommate whose company you tolerated but didn't particularly enjoy. Physical intimacy followed the same trajectory. What had once been frequent became occasional, then rare, then essentially non-existent. When I tried to initiate connection, Parker cited exhaustion. The stress of managing rapid company growth. The demands of dealing with investors who needed constant updates. He suggested we were just going through a difficult phase that would improve once things stabilized. I believed those explanations because believing them was easier than confronting what they might actually mean. I made excuses constantly. To myself. To Kate, who started asking uncomfortable questions about why we never seemed happy anymore when we were together at family dinners. To our friends who noticed we barely spoke to each other at social events, sitting on opposite sides of rooms, only interacting when someone directly engaged us both in conversation. I was so determined to believe my marriage was fundamentally sound that I ignored every signal suggesting otherwise. Every late night that smelled like unfamiliar perfume. Every weekend emergency at the office that took Parker away for entire days. Every unexplained charge on our credit card, charges I noticed but convinced myself had reasonable explanations I simply hadn't thought of yet. The penthouse became my refuge and my prison. I'd stand at those windows looking out at the city, wondering when exactly I'd become so lonely in a marriage that was supposed to eliminate loneliness. I'd decorated this place to communicate success, but success for whom? Parker's company was thriving. His net worth was climbing. And I was, what? The woman who kept the home running. The invisible support system. I started noticing how Parker introduced me at events. "This is my wife, Carrie," he'd say, and nothing more. No mention of how we met. No acknowledgement of how I'd helped build his network. Just, my wife, like I was an accessory that came with the lifestyle package. Meanwhile, I was still managing everything that kept our lives functional. I coordinated with building management when the elevator needed servicing. I handled the property taxes on the penthouse, taxes that came out of my inheritance fund because the penthouse was still solely in my name, though Parker didn't seem to remember that detail. I organized the cleaning service, managed our social calendar, made sure his mother received birthday flowers and his father got the right scotch delivered at Christmas. I was performing all the invisible labor that allowed Parker to focus entirely on being a successful CEO. And he'd started treating that labor not as partnership, but as obligation. As though I existed to make his life easier, and any request for emotional connection or acknowledgement was an unreasonable demand on his valuable time. My consulting career had taken a back seat. I'd turned down promotions because Parker's networking events required my attendance. I'd passed on projects because his company needed me to host investor dinners. I'd made my career smaller so his could expand. And somewhere in those 2 years, Parker had stopped seeing me as a partner and started seeing me as, what? An employee? A service provider? Someone who came with the penthouse? The real breaking point came on a Tuesday afternoon about 4 months ago. I was working from home, finishing a presentation for one of my few remaining clients, when Parker came back to the penthouse at 3 in the afternoon. This was unusual, he rarely left the office before 8 anymore. He looked flustered, excited in a way I hadn't seen in months. "I need to show the place to someone," he said, not even greeting me first. "A potential business partner. She wants to see the penthouse." "She?" I asked, looking up from my laptop. "Sienna Michaels. She runs a commercial real estate investment firm. We're talking about a partnership for the company's next phase." He was already straightening pillows on the couch, adjusting the art on the walls like he was preparing for an inspection. "Can you make yourself scarce for an hour? Maybe go to that coffee shop you like?" Something cold settled in my stomach. "This is my home, Parker. I'm working." I know. But this is important. She's considering a major investment, and I want her to see the lifestyle the company can provide. It's all about perception at this level. The lifestyle the company can provide. Not our home. Not the place we built together. The lifestyle. Like the penthouse was a prop in his business performance. I left. I actually left my own home so my husband could impress some woman I'd never heard of. I sat in a coffee shop 3 blocks away for an hour and a half, staring at my laptop screen and feeling something fundamental shift inside me. When I came back, Parker was alone, pouring himself bourbon in the kitchen. "How'd it go?" I asked. "Great. Really great." She was impressed. He was smiling, energized. She said the penthouse has exactly the kind of aesthetic that communicates success. Said it shows I have good taste. I had decorated that penthouse. Every piece of furniture, every art selection, every design choice. But Parker said, I have good taste, not we. Who is she, exactly? I asked carefully. I told you. Real estate investment. She's got connections to some serious money. He was scrolling through his phone again, barely looking at me. We're meeting again Thursday to discuss terms. That was the moment I started paying attention differently. Thursday came, and Parker left at 6, saying he had a dinner meeting with Sienna to discuss the investment structure. He came home at midnight, smelling like wine and some floral perfume that definitely wasn't mine. Long meeting, I said from the couch where I'd been reading. Yeah, lots to cover. She's particular about terms. He headed straight to the bedroom without kissing me goodnight. I picked up his jacket from where he dropped it on the chair. In the pocket was a business card, Sienna Michaels, CEO, Prestige Property Holdings. On the back, in feminine handwriting, Tuesday 7 p.m. Same place? The same place. Not a first meeting. A regular place. I started watching more carefully after that. Parker had a Tuesday evening, standing meeting with investors that he'd never mentioned before. Thursday nights became networking events with the commercial real estate sector. Saturdays, he started going to an executive gym downtown that apparently had crucial business networking opportunities. I checked our credit card statements. There were charges at restaurants I'd never been to, always for 2 people, based on the amounts. The Gramercy Tavern. Le Bernardin. Per se, places that cost hundreds per person, charged to our joint account, for dinners I wasn't invited to. There were hotel charges too. The Greenwich Hotel. The Crosby. Always during hours when Parker claimed to be at the office working late. Sometimes I just need a quiet space to think through strategy, he'd told me once when I'd noticed a hotel bill. The office gets too chaotic. Kate came over for lunch one Saturday, one of the Saturdays Parker was at his executive gym. "You look exhausted," she said, studying my face across the kitchen island. "When's the last time you slept properly?" "I sleep fine," I lied. "Carrie." She put down her fork. "What's going on with Parker? You barely mention him anymore. You never talk about doing anything together. At Mom's birthday last month, you two didn't speak to each other the entire night. We're just busy. His company is in a growth phase. That's not what this is." Kate's voice was gentle but firm. "I've watched you get smaller and smaller over the past 2 years. You turned down that creative director position. You stopped seeing your friends. You're living in this beautiful penthouse like you're a guest in your own home." "I'm fine," I said automatically. "You're not fine. And whatever's happening with Parker, you need to face it instead of making excuses for him." I wanted to defend him. To explain that successful marriages required weathering difficult seasons. That ambitious men sometimes got consumed by work in ways that temporarily affected their relationships. That my role as a supportive wife meant giving him space to build something important. But I couldn't make myself say any of it. Because sitting there with Kate, I realized I'd stopped believing my own excuses. The invitation appeared in my email 3 weeks before our 5th anniversary. Not as a text from Parker. Not through a conversation over breakfast about planning something special. But as a formal digital invitation with professional design and calligraphy, announcing a celebration at our penthouse on Saturday, October 14th. I stared at my laptop screen in our bedroom, feeling my heart rate accelerate. Parker had planned an anniversary party. In our home. Without mentioning a single word to me. The invitation listed 50 guests. I recognized maybe half the names, his business partners, investors, people from his company's leadership team. The other half were strangers to me. And right there, third from the top of the guest list, Sienna Michaels. He'd invited his business partner to our anniversary party. I scrolled through the details with growing nausea. Catering by some high-end company I'd never heard of. Jazz quartet for entertainment. Premium bar service. The invitation requested RSVPs to an email address that wasn't mine. Parker had orchestrated an entire event in my home without involving me in a single decision. I sat there for 20 minutes, just staring at that invitation, and something crystallized. This wasn't about celebrating our marriage. This was about something else entirely. Something that required an audience and careful planning and my penthouse as the backdrop. When Parker came home that evening at 10, another late night at the office, I was waiting in the living room with my laptop open. "Did you plan an anniversary party?" I asked. He had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. "Yeah, I was going to tell you. Just wanted to get everything locked in first. You invited 50 people to our home without asking me." "It's a surprise," he said, loosening his tie. "I thought you'd be happy. You're always saying we don't do anything special anymore. I say we don't do anything together anymore. This isn't together, Parker. This is you planning an event in my home and informing me after the fact." "Our home," he corrected, an edge creeping into his voice. "And I'm trying to do something nice. Can you not turn this into a problem? Our home. He said it with such certainty, such ownership. Like the penthouse belonged to him as much as to me. Like he'd forgotten, or never really acknowledged, that his name had never been on the deed. Who's Sienna Michaels? I asked, keeping my voice level. I told you. The real estate investor. She's considering a major partnership with the company. It would be rude not to invite her to a significant personal event. He was already walking toward the bedroom, ending the conversation. It's just business, Carrie. Stop being paranoid. After he went to bed, I called Kate. He planned an anniversary party without telling you? Her voice was sharp with anger. In your penthouse? 50 people. Catering. Entertainment. The whole thing. Carrie, when a man who's been emotionally checked out for 2 years suddenly throws an elaborate party without consulting his wife, that's not romance. She paused. That's a performance. For someone else. You think it's for her? Sienna? I think you need to be ready for whatever he's planning to do in front of all those people. Men like Parker don't do anything without calculating the impression it makes. If he's bringing 50 witnesses to your anniversary, it's because he wants them to see something. After we hung up, I sat alone in the dark living room, looking out at the city lights. Kate's words echoed in my head. A performance. For someone else. I thought about all the signs I'd been ignoring. The late nights. The unexplained charges. The way Parker introduced me at events like I was a footnote in his success story. The way he'd started treating the penthouse like it was his achievement rather than my inheritance. And I thought about Sienna Michaels, whose name kept appearing everywhere. Tuesday dinners. Thursday meetings. Now invited to our anniversary party like she belonged there. Something hard settled in my chest. A kind of clarity I hadn't felt in 2 years. I was not going to be a victim. I was not going to stand in my own home while my husband performed whatever he had planned, passively accepting whatever humiliation he'd orchestrated. I was going to be ready. That night, I opened a new browser window and started researching. Divorce attorneys who specialized in high net worth cases. Property law experts. Forensic accountants who could trace hidden assets. I found a name that kept appearing in reviews, Monica Booth, a divorce attorney whose specialty was cases involving substantial wealth and complex asset concealment. Her website featured testimonials from women who'd been in situations similar to what I suspected mine was becoming. One review in particular caught my attention. Monica found money my ex swore didn't exist and made him pay for trying to hide it. She turned my worst day into my best decision. At 2 a.m, I sent an email requesting a consultation. 3 weeks from now, I'd be standing in my living room watching my husband try to destroy me in front of 50 witnesses. But I wasn't going to let that happen. I was going to destroy him first. Monica Booth's office was in a glass tower in Midtown, the kind of building where the elevator buttons required a key card and the reception area had fresh orchids that were probably replaced daily. I met with her 2 days after sending that late-night email. Took a long lunch from work, claiming a dentist appointment, and found myself sitting across from a woman in her early 50s with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. Tell me everything, she said, pulling out a legal pad. I walked her through the past 2 years. The emotional distance. The unexplained absences. The woman named Sienna who kept appearing in Parker's life. The anniversary party he'd planned without me in a penthouse he seemed to have forgotten wasn't his. Monica listened without interrupting, taking notes in shorthand I couldn't read. When I finished, she looked up with an expression that was somehow both sympathetic and calculating. The penthouse, it's in your name only? Yeah. Inherited it from my grandmother years before I even met Parker. Never changed the deed after we married. Monica's expression sharpened. Smart. Does he know that? I don't think he's ever thought about it. He just assumed. Men like him always do. She made a note. And you have access to joint financial accounts? Credit cards, yes. He has separate business accounts I don't have access to. We'll document everything you can access. Every charge, every transaction, every pattern you've noticed. And I'm going to recommend we bring in a forensic accountant and a private investigator. You think it's that serious? Monica set down her pen and looked at me directly. Let me put it this way, your husband planned a party in a home that isn't his, invited his mistress, and thinks you're too stupid to notice. Yeah, I'd say it's serious. And I'd bet money he's already planning how to take everything he can. Over the next month, Monica assembled a team that operated with surgical precision. The forensic accountant, a man named James Walker, started analyzing our financial records. The private investigator, a former NYPD detective named Eric Booth, began documenting Parker's movements. What they found was worse than I'd imagined. James showed me the money trail. Parker had been draining our joint accounts for months, moving cash into personal accounts I never knew existed. 1,000 here, 2,000 there, then bigger chunks as he got bolder. By James's calculation, Parker had moved almost $200,000 into accounts bearing only his name. Smart guy, your husband, James said during one of our meetings in Monica's office. He's hiding money in business accounts, which would be fine if it was actually business money. But he's pulling from your joint account and pretending it's company funds. That's theft with paperwork. Eric's surveillance was even more damaging. He provided me with photographs that made my stomach turn. Parker and Sienna at outdoor cafes in Soho, holding hands across tables. Parker and Sienna entering the Greenwich Hotel at 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday, emerging 3 hours later with body language that left nothing to interpretation. Parker and Sienna shopping together on Madison Avenue, him carrying bags from jewelry stores I'd never visited. They've been together for at least 8 months, Eric said, laying out photographs in chronological order. Meeting 2 to 3 times per week. Always during business hours when he's supposedly at the office. They're not particularly careful, they go to public places, restaurants where anyone could see them. Why would he be so careless? I asked. Monica answered. Because he doesn't think you're paying attention. Or he doesn't care if you find out because he's already planning to leave. But the most devastating discovery came when Eric followed up on Sienna's background. She wasn't just a commercial real estate investor. She was a luxury real estate broker who specialized in high-end properties. Her Instagram, which Eric showed me on his iPad, featured posts about multi-million-dollar penthouses, including several recent stories about finding the perfect home for my perfect future. One post from 2 weeks ago showed a view I recognized immediately, the skyline from my terrace. The caption read, "Can't wait to wake up to this every morning. Dreams really do come true." She'd been in my home. On my terrace. Photographing my view. Planning to take my life. She thinks she's moving in, I said, staring at that photograph. She thinks a lot of things, Monica replied. The question is, what does Parker think? What's his endgame here? James pulled out another document. I found something else. Parker's been meeting with a real estate attorney. I got access to some email exchanges through the business account. He slid a printout across the table. I read the email thread with growing horror. Parker had been inquiring about having the penthouse valued and potentially listed for sale. The attorney had advised him that since the property was in my name alone, he'd need my signature to sell it. Parker's response was chilling, working on that. She'll sign whatever I need her to sign. He's planning to trick you into signing over the penthouse, Monica said quietly. I looked at her, then at James, then at Eric. 3 people who'd spent weeks documenting my husband's systematic betrayal. What do we do? I asked. Monica smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. We let him think he's winning. And then we take everything. That night, I went home and looked at Parker differently. He was in the kitchen when I arrived, pouring himself bourbon, already on his phone texting someone. He barely glanced up when I walked in. How was work? I asked, setting my bag on the counter. Long, lots of investor calls. He took a sip of his drink, still scrolling. I'm going to eat something quick and finish some emails in the office. The office. The spare bedroom he'd converted into his workspace, where he spent most evenings now with the door closed. Okay, I said. I might just make a salad and catch up on some reading. He nodded absently and disappeared down the hall. I stood in my kitchen, the kitchen I'd renovated 2 years ago, with the marble countertops I'd selected and the custom cabinets I'd designed, and felt something shift inside me. The sadness was gone. What replaced it was cold, focused clarity. Monica had given me specific instructions. Document everything. Maintain normalcy. Don't confront. Don't reveal what I knew. Let Parker think he was still in control while we built an airtight case. So that's what I did. For the next month, I lived a double life. By day, the supportive wife, making coffee, asking about his meetings, pretending I believed his lies. By night, the detective, screenshotting bank statements, forwarding emails to Monica, documenting every charge and every lie. The cloud account grew, restaurants folder. Hotels folder. Retail folder. Each one time-stamped, organized, irrefutable. I started checking our credit card statements daily, screenshotting every charge. Lunch at the Modern, $470. Dinner at 11 Madison Park, $620. A purchase at Cartier, $8,300. None of these involved me. I created a secure cloud account using my work email and a password Parker would never guess. Every screenshot went into organized folders by category and date. When Parker left his laptop open one morning, he'd gotten careless, confident in his deception. I photographed his calendar. The entries were damning. Lunch appeared every Tuesday and Thursday. Evening populated most Wednesday nights. There was even an entry for 3 weeks from now, weekend away, confirm reservation. I forwarded everything to Monica, who forwarded it to James and Eric. Eric's surveillance continued. He provided me with a comprehensive timeline of Parker's movements, complete with photographs and video footage. Parker leaving his office at noon to meet Sienna at St. Ambrius. Parker and Sienna walking through Central Park holding hands. Parker entering Sienna's apartment building in Tribeca and not leaving until the following morning. That last piece of evidence came with a timestamp, Tuesday, 3 weeks ago. The night Parker had texted me saying he was sleeping at the office because he had an early investor breakfast and didn't want to wake me. Your husband spent the night at her apartment, Eric said during our meeting, his voice matter of fact. Left at 6:30 wearing the same clothes from the day before. I looked at the photograph of Parker walking out of Sienna's building, coffee cup in hand, checking his phone. He looked relaxed. Happy. The way he used to look with me, years ago. How are you holding up? Monica asked, watching my face. I'm fine, I said. And surprisingly, I was. The discovery phase had transformed my pain into something else. Purpose. Strategy. The satisfaction of knowing that every piece of evidence we gathered was another nail in the coffin Parker was building for himself. James discovered more financial irregularities. Parker had taken out a home equity line of credit against the Penthouse, or tried to. The application had been denied because his name wasn't on the deed, but the attempt was documented. He'd forged my signature on the initial application. That's fraud, Monica said. Attempted fraud at minimum. We can use this. She pulled out another document. I had James dig into Parker's company finances. Your husband has been quite creative with his accounting. James opened his laptop and walked me through what he'd found. Parker had been inflating the company's valuation by manipulating revenue projections. He'd also been paying himself a substantial salary while claiming the company was still in a growth phase that required careful budgeting. Money that should have been going to investors or company development was being funneled into his personal accounts. Some of his investors might be very interested in this information, Monica said. Particularly the ones who are invited to your anniversary party. The party. It was now 10 days away. Parker had been coming home earlier some evenings, almost cheerful. He'd hum while making coffee in the mornings. Once, I caught him smiling at his phone with an expression of pure satisfaction. He thought everything was going according to plan. He had no idea that while he'd been orchestrating my humiliation, I'd been building his complete destruction. Monica laid out our strategy in her conference room 1 week before the anniversary. "He's going to do something public at that party," she said. "Based on the pattern, the venue choice, the guest list, the fact that Sienna is invited, he's planning to announce something. Possibly the divorce. Possibly his relationship with her. Either way, he wants witnesses." "So we give him witnesses," I said. Monica smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. "Exactly. We let him perform his little show. And then we show everyone who he really is." She pulled out a folder thick with documentation. Financial records. Surveillance photographs. Email exchanges. Legal documents proving attempted fraud. "We're going to need the Penthouse's AV system," Monica said. "Can you arrange access?" "It's my penthouse," I said. "I can arrange whatever I need." 5 days before the anniversary party, Monica called an emergency meeting. "We found something," she said when I arrived at her office. Her tone was serious in a way that made my pulse quicken. James was already there, along with a woman I didn't recognize, mid-40s, wearing a charcoal suit, with the kind of presence that suggested federal authority. "Carrie, this is Anna St. George. She's the person who finds money people think they've hidden well enough." Anna shook my hand with a firm grip. "Mrs. Walker, I've been reviewing the financial documentation James compiled regarding your husband's company. There are some significant irregularities that extend well beyond marital asset concealment." She opened her laptop and turned it toward me. Spreadsheets filled the screen, columns of numbers that meant nothing to me but apparently told Anna a complete story. "So Parker's company took in $35 million from investors over 3 years, Anna explained. "That money was supposed to build the business, product development, hiring, expansion. Want to guess where it actually went?" "His personal playground." James jumped in. "Parker's been moving company funds through a series of shell corporations. On paper, these look like legitimate business expenses, consulting fees, contractor payments, service agreements. But when we dig deeper, many of these companies don't actually provide services. They're just vehicles for moving money." "How much money?" I asked. "Conservatively? About $4 million over 2 years." The number hung in the air. $4 million in investor money, funneled through fake companies, going, where? Anna clicked to another screen. Some went to personal accounts. Some was used to purchase assets in other people's names, likely to hide them from scrutiny. And some appears to have funded a lifestyle that his actual salary wouldn't support. She showed me credit card statements I'd never seen before. Charges that dwarfed even the excessive spending I'd already discovered. A weekend in Paris, $28,000. A watch purchase, $45,000. A down payment on a luxury SUV registered to Sienna Michaels, $75,000. "He bought her a car with investor money," I said flatly. "He bought her several things with investor money," Monica corrected. "Including what appears to be a condo in Miami. The deed shows Sienna as the owner, but the payment came from one of Parker's shell corporations." I sat back in my chair, processing. "His investors have no idea." "Correct. And several of those investors will be at your anniversary party." Monica pulled out the guest list Parker had created. She'd annotated it with notes. Richard Chen invested $2 million in Series A. David Martinez led the Series B round with $8 million. Laura Hawthorne came in during the most recent round with $5 million. They'll all be in your living room watching Parker perform whatever show he has planned. They need to know what he's done with their money, I said. Anna leaned forward. There's more. I contacted some colleagues who work with the SEC. Based on the documentation we've compiled, there's sufficient evidence to launch an investigation into securities fraud. If Parker's been misrepresenting how investor funds are being used, that's a federal crime. The room went quiet. How serious? I asked. Potentially very serious. We're talking about systematic fraud across multiple funding rounds, falsified financial reports, and misappropriation of investor capital. If the SEC investigates and finds what we've found, Parker could face criminal charges. Fines in the millions. Possibly prison time. Monica watched my reaction carefully. This isn't just about your divorce anymore, Carrie. This is about documenting a pattern of fraudulent behavior that's hurt a lot of people. The question is, how far do you want to take this? I thought about the past 2 years. Parker coming home late, claiming he was building something important. Me supporting every decision, every risk, believing we were working toward a shared future. Meanwhile, he'd been stealing from investors, buying gifts for his mistress, and planning to trick me into signing over my home. I want to take it as far as it needs to go, I said. His investors deserve to know the truth. And if what he's done is criminal, he should face criminal consequences. Anna nodded approvingly. I'll need to prepare a formal complaint for the SEC. It won't be filed until after your anniversary party. We don't want to tip him off, but we should have everything ready. There's one more thing, James said, pulling out another document. I found correspondence between Parker and Sienna about the anniversary party. You need to see this. He handed me a printed email thread. The messages were from last week. Parker, everything set for Saturday. Catering, music, the whole show. She has no idea what's coming. Sienna, I still can't believe you're doing this at your anniversary party. Are you sure? Parker, it's perfect. Everyone important will be there. I announce we're done, introduce you as my partner, business and personal, and we move forward. Clean break. She gets some settlement, we get the life we deserve. Sienna, what about the penthouse? Parker, I'm working on it. I've got documents ready for her to sign. Once the party's over and she's emotional, I'll tell her it's just a formality for the divorce. She'll sign anything at that point. By next month, we'll have it listed and sold. That place is worth at least $8 million. Split it, and we've got $4 million to start our new life. I read it twice, my hands completely steady. He was planning to manipulate me into signing over my grandmother's penthouse in the emotional aftermath of a public divorce announcement. He'd calculated that I'd be too devastated to read what I was signing. He doesn't know the penthouse is solely yours, Monica observed. No, I said. He's convinced himself it's marital property. He's forgotten, or never really acknowledged, that it was mine before he ever entered my life. Then let's make sure he remembers, Monica said. In the most public way possible. The last week before the anniversary party felt like living in a thriller where I knew the ending but had to keep pretending I didn't. Every morning, I woke up next to a man who was planning my public humiliation. Every evening, I made conversation with someone who was stealing from me. Every night, I lay in bed listening to him sleep peacefully while I ran through the plan Monica and I had built, checking for weaknesses, preparing for every possible variable. Tuesday, 5 days before the party, Parker came home early again. He was in a good mood, whistling as he poured wine for both of us without being asked. I think you're going to really enjoy Saturday, he said, handing me a glass. I put a lot of thought into it. I'm sure it'll be memorable, I said, and that was completely true. He smiled. It'll be a new beginning. For both of us. The audacity was breathtaking. He was sitting in my living room, drinking my wine, talking about new beginnings while planning to steal my home and abandon me for a woman he'd bought a Miami condo for with stolen investor money. I'm looking forward to it, I lied, and watched him relax into the couch, completely confident in his control of the narrative. Wednesday, I met with Monica one final time to review every detail. The AV system is ready, she asked. I spoke to the building's tech manager yesterday. Told him I wanted to prepare a surprise photo montage for Parker. He showed me how to connect wirelessly to all the screens in the penthouse. I tested it this morning, everything works perfectly. Monica pulled out a tablet and showed me the presentation she'd created. It was devastating in its simplicity. Clean design, professional layout, completely factual. No emotion, no commentary, just evidence arranged in chronological order for maximum impact. It opened with photographs of Parker and Sienna. Not just a few images, but a comprehensive timeline. 8 months of documented affair, time-stamped and geotagged. Lunches, dinners, hotel visits, apartment overnights. The visual proof was irrefutable. Then came the financial documentation. Bank statements showing the systematic transfer of funds from our joint accounts to Parker's private accounts. Credit card charges for expenses that benefited only him and Sienna. The home equity loan application with my forged signature. The attempted fraud documented in official bank records. The third section detailed the corporate malfeasance. Anna had walked me through the shell game. Fake companies with real-sounding names. Money flowing in from investors, then vanishing into Parker's personal accounts. For $1 million over 2 years, spent on everything except the business he'd promised to build. The itemized expenses made me sick. A condo in Miami, purchased for $650,000, titled to Sienna Michaels. A Mercedes G-Wagon, $75,000. A weekend in Paris, $28,000. Jewelry totaling $53,000. The final section was a letter, formatted on official letterhead, from Anna St. George's firm, outlining the SEC complaint that would be filed Monday morning. The document listed potential charges: securities fraud, wire fraud, investor deception, falsification of financial records. Each charge carried potential prison time. "This is going to destroy him," I said quietly. "He destroyed himself," Monica corrected. "We're just documenting what he did." Thursday evening, Kate came over. Parker was out, another investor dinner, that I now knew was actually dinner with Sienna at Carbone, based on the reservation Eric had confirmed. "How are you really doing?" Kate asked, sitting beside me on the couch. "Honestly? I'm calmer than I've been in months. Maybe years. That's either really healthy or really concerning." I laughed. I spent 2 years doubting myself, making excuses for him, wondering what I'd done wrong. Now I know exactly what happened. He's a liar and a thief who underestimated me. And on Saturday, everyone he's invited to witness my humiliation is going to watch him lose everything instead. Kate studied my face. "You're sure about this? Once you do this, there's no going back." "There's already no going back. Parker made that decision when he started planning this party. I'm just making sure the ending is different than the one he wrote." Friday afternoon, I went to the salon. Got my hair done, my nails manicured. I'd bought a dress for the party, midnight blue silk that made me feel powerful rather than decorative. When I looked in the mirror, I saw someone who looked nothing like a victim. Friday night, Parker was almost giddy. He kept checking his phone and smiling, clearly texting Sienna about their plans. At one point, his phone buzzed and I saw the preview of her message: "Tomorrow we finally stop hiding. I can't wait to start our real life. Our real life. In my penthouse. With my money. After destroying my marriage in front of 50 witnesses. Big day tomorrow," Parker said, pouring himself another bourbon. "I want you to wear something nice. Really nice. I want you to look your best." He wanted me to look good for my own execution. To dress up for the moment he planned to discard me. "I already picked out something special," I said. "Perfect." He raised his glass. "To new beginnings." I raised mine. "To getting exactly what we deserve." We clinked glasses, and I saw my reflection in the window behind him, calm, composed, ready. Saturday morning, Parker left early to check on party preparations. Really, he was meeting Sienna one last time before their big debut as a couple. Eric confirmed it with a text: "They're at her apartment." He brought flowers. I spent the morning getting ready slowly, methodically. Did my makeup carefully. Put on the blue dress. Checked my phone one last time. "Monica, everything's ready." See you at 7. Kate, I'll be there by 6:45. Phone fully charged and ready to record. Eric, in position outside. Got visual on catering arrival. James, all documentation backed up and ready. This is going to be epic. At 6:30, I stood in my penthouse, my grandmother's gift, my sanctuary, the home Parker thought he could take from me, and looked out at the city one last time before everything changed. 3 months of preparation had burned away the fear. What remained was pure focus. Then I walked to the door to greet the first guests arriving to what they thought was an anniversary celebration. It was time. By 7 o'clock, my penthouse was filled with 50 people who had no idea they were about to witness the most expensive mistake of Parker St. George's life. The caterers circulated with appetizers that probably cost $600 per person. The jazz quartet played softly near the terrace doors. The champagne flowing freely came from the wine collection I'd started before I ever met Parker. Everything looked perfect, elegant, sophisticated, exactly the kind of event that communicated success and stability. Parker stood near the center of the living room, holding court with his investors. He was wearing a new suit, Tom Ford, probably $4,000, charged to our joint account 3 days ago. He looked confident, relaxed, like a man about to execute a plan he'd rehearsed perfectly. Sienna arrived at 7:15. She wore red, a dress that probably cost more than most people's rent, designer heels, jewelry that caught the light expensively. Her hair was styled in loose waves, her makeup camera ready. She looked like success, like youth, like everything Parker had decided he deserved. She walked straight to Parker and kissed his cheek. Not a professional greeting. A proprietary kiss that made several guests exchange glances. I was standing near the kitchen with Kate, who had her phone positioned on the counter, already recording. Monica was by the terrace, looking like just another guest in her elegant navy dress, her own phone ready. "You okay?" Kate whispered. "I'm perfect," I said, and meant it. Parker caught my eye across the room and smiled. Not a warm smile. A smile that said he knew something I didn't, that he was in control, that tonight would go exactly as he'd planned. Dinner was served at 7:30. We didn't sit at a formal table. Parker had arranged for standing reception style, keeping everything casual, mobile, ensuring maximum audience for whatever announcement he'd planned. I watched him work the room, Sienna always within arm's reach. He introduced her to investors as his strategic partner. He laughed at her jokes. He touched her back with casual familiarity that made his intentions obvious to anyone paying attention. At 8 o'clock, Parker clinked his champagne glass with a fork. The room went quiet. 50 faces turned toward him, expecting a toast, a sweet anniversary speech, maybe an embarrassing story about our relationship. "Thank you all for celebrating with us tonight," Parker began, his voice carrying across the room with practiced confidence. 5 years ago, I made a commitment. Tonight, I want to be honest about what that commitment has taught me. I stood near the kitchen counter, my hand resting casually near my phone. 3 months of preparation had burned away the fear. What remained was pure focus. "Marriage shows you who you really are," Parker continued. "What you're capable of. What you actually need versus what you thought you wanted." He looked directly at me across the room. "Carrie has been comfortable. Stable. The kind of wife who keeps the home running while you're building something bigger." Several guests shifted uncomfortably. They could sense something wrong in his tone, in the way he was describing his wife at their anniversary party. "But I've outgrown comfortable," he said, and his hand moved to Sienna's shoulder. "My company just hit $1 billion valuation. I'm operating at a different level now. I need a partner who matches where I am, not where I was." Sienna was smiling. She actually thought this was romantic, that she was winning something valuable. Parker reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila envelope. He walked across my living room, past the furniture I'd selected, over the rugs I'd chosen, beneath the lighting I'd designed, and placed the envelope on the marble counter in front of me. "Divorce papers," he announced to the room. "Already filed, already processed. I'm done settling, Carrie. You should find someone more appropriate to your level. Someone who doesn't need the kind of life I can provide." The room erupted. Not in gasps of horror, but in supportive murmurs. His business partner actually clapped his shoulder. Someone near the terrace laughed nervously. Sienna was beaming like she'd just won a prize at a carnival. This was Parker's moment. His grand declaration. His public claim to a better future with a woman he thought deserved his success more than I did. He'd orchestrated this perfectly, the venue, the audience, the timing. Everything calculated to make his exit look like an upgrade rather than a betrayal. He'd even chosen my penthouse as the setting, wanting the visual proof of wealth as backdrop to his announcement. Wanting everyone to see what he was walking away from, confident they'd understand he was trading up. What he didn't know was that this penthouse had never been his. What he didn't know was that every person he'd invited was about to learn exactly who he really was. What he didn't know was that I'd been expecting this for 3 months. I looked at the divorce papers on the counter. I looked at Parker's triumphant face, at Sienna standing beside him like a trophy, at 50 witnesses who thought they'd just watched a successful man claim his freedom. Then I smiled. Not a sad smile. Not a broken smile. But something genuine that came from a place of absolute certainty. "Thank you," I said quietly. But in the silence that had fallen over the room, my voice carried perfectly to every corner. "Truly, Parker. Thank you for this gift." I watched Parker's confidence drain from his face. This wasn't the script he'd written. I was supposed to cry, to beg, to make a scene that validated his decision. I picked up my phone from the counter with deliberate care. "Since we're sharing important documents tonight," I said, my voice steady and carrying across the room with unexpected authority, "I have something too. A little anniversary surprise of my own." My phone connected to the penthouse's AV system on the first attempt. The screens mounted throughout the living room, the ones I'd had installed 2 years ago for entertaining, the ones Parker had used dozens of times to show investor presentations, all flickered to life simultaneously. What appeared wasn't a sentimental photo montage celebrating marital happiness. It was Monica's carefully edited presentation, opening with simple white text on a black screen. What Parker did while planning our anniversary. The jazz quartet stopped playing. Every conversation died. 50 people turned toward the screens positioned around the room, unable to look away. The first image appeared. Parker and Sienna at an outdoor cafe in Soho, holding hands across the table. The timestamp in the corner showed the date, 6 months ago, a Tuesday afternoon when Parker had told me he was touring properties in Brooklyn. The next image, Parker and Sienna entering the Greenwich Hotel. Timestamp, 2:47 p.m. on a Thursday. Exit timestamp, 6:23 p.m. 3.5 hours. Then another, Parker and Sienna shopping together on Madison Avenue, him carrying bags from Cartier. The receipt appeared beside the photo, $8,300 charged to our joint credit card. The images kept coming, each one worse than the last. A comprehensive timeline of an 8-month affair, documented with timestamps and locations that corresponded exactly to times Parker had claimed to be at work, at investor meetings, touring properties, building his business. I let that sink in for 30 seconds. Watched Parker's face cycle through emotions too fast to name. Watched Richard Chen pull out his phone, already calculating his exposure. Watched Sienna realize this wasn't the romantic debut she'd imagined. Parker's face had gone from triumphant to pale. "Carrie, what are you?" "I'm not done," I said calmly. The presentation shifted to financial documents. Bank statements showing systematic transfers from our joint accounts to accounts bearing only Parker's name. The numbers scrolled past in neat columns, $2,000 here, $5,000 there, accelerating to $15,000 and $20,000 transfers over the past 6 months. Total, $197,000 in marital funds moved without my knowledge or consent. Credit card statements appeared next. Charges I discovered during my research. The Modern, $470. 11 Madison Park, $620. Le Bernardin, $890. Hotels, restaurants, retail purchases, all charged to our joint account, all for dinners and experiences I'd never been invited to. Several of Parker's investors were leaning forward now, their expressions shifting from confusion to concern. They recognized financial impropriety when they saw it. The room had gone from silent to buzzing, whispered conversations, phones being pulled out, investors doing mental math on how much of their money had paid for Parker's affair. But the presentation wasn't finished. The next section made the room completely silent. Text appeared, "Where your investment went." Shell Corporation names scrolled across the screen, followed by transaction records showing investor funds being moved through these companies. Anna's forensic work was displayed in clear, undeniable detail. Summit Strategic Consulting, $340,000 received from Parker's company for advisory services. Investigation showed no actual services provided. Money transferred to Parker's personal accounts. Apex Development Partners, $520,000 for market research and development. The company existed only on paper. Funds used to purchase luxury items and finance Parker's lifestyle. Then came the itemized expenses that made several people in the room audibly gasp. A condo in Miami, purchased for $650,000 through a shell corporation, titled to Sienna Michaels. A Mercedes G-Wagon, $75,000, registered to Sienna Michaels. A weekend trip to Paris, $28,000, charged to a corporate card meant for business expenses. Jewelry purchases totaling $53,000 over 6 months. The numbers kept appearing, each one representing investor money diverted from business development to fund Parker's affair and buy gifts for his mistress. I glanced at Richard Chen, who'd invested $2 million in Series A. His face had gone hard, his jaw clenched. David Martinez, who'd led the Series B round with $8 million, was already pulling out his phone, typing rapidly. Parker was standing frozen in the center of the room, his earlier confidence completely evaporated. Sienna had gone pale, one hand pressed to her mouth. You can't, Parker stammered, but his voice had no authority left. "I'm still not done," I said. The final document appeared on the screens. Official letterhead from Anna St. George's forensic auditing firm, formatted as a formal complaint. The text was clear and devastating. Notice of securities fraud investigation. Based on comprehensive forensic analysis, evidence suggests systematic misappropriation of investor capital, falsification of financial records, and fraudulent representation of fund allocation. This complaint will be filed with the Securities and Exchange Commission on Monday, October 16. Potential charges include securities fraud, wire fraud, investor deception, falsification of corporate financial records. Estimated misappropriated funds, $4.2 million. Potential penalties, fines up to $25 million, criminal prosecution, prison term of 5 to 20 years. The room erupted in chaos. Richard Chen was already on his phone, stepping toward the terrace. David Martinez was reading the screen with an expression of pure fury. Laura Hawthorne, who'd invested $5 million in the most recent round, was demanding answers from Parker in a voice that cut through the confusion. Parker tried to speak, but no coherent words came out. He looked like someone drowning, unable to breathe or think or process what was happening. I walked slowly across the room to where he stood, my heels clicking on the hardwood floor my grandmother had refinished in the 90s. I reached into my clutch and pulled out a second set of papers. "You gave me divorce papers," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Here are mine." I placed them in his hands with the same casual cruelty he'd shown me minutes earlier. "These are from Monica Booth, my attorney. You'll recognize some of the language because it's similar to your version. Except in mine, you don't get anything. Not the penthouse you tried to forge my signature to steal. Not the investments you tried to hide. Nothing beyond exactly what you're legally entitled to, which, given what you've stolen, might actually be less than zero." Monica stood from her position near the terrace. Professional and terrifying, she commanded attention without raising her voice. "The SEC complaint is legitimate," she announced to the room. "I contacted them personally regarding Mr. St. George's financial irregularities. They were very interested in the documentation Mrs. Walker provided. His mouth opened and closed. No sound emerged. I turned to Sienna, who was crying now, mascara running in dark streaks. The Miami condo he bought you? That was investor money. The car? Investor money. Every dinner, every gift, every luxury weekend, all funded with money that wasn't his to spend. I'd start looking for a good attorney if I were you. They tend to prosecute accomplices in fraud cases. Sienna made a sound between a sob and a gasp. I looked at the 50 guests, many now recording this scene on their phones just as they'd recorded what they thought was my humiliation minutes earlier. Thank you all for witnessing this, I said. Your presence makes everything documented, public, and very permanent. Then I picked up my clutch, nodded to Kate and Monica, and walked toward my bedroom. Oh, and Parker? I stopped at the hallway entrance. You have 48 hours to remove your belongings from my penthouse. After that, building security has instructions to change the locks and dispose of anything you've left behind. I walked away from 50 stunned guests, a weeping mistress, and a husband whose life I'd just systematically demolished using nothing more than patience, evidence, and the truth. Behind me, I heard Richard Chen's voice, loud and furious. You spent my money on what? The sounds of Parker's empire collapsing echoed through my penthouse as I closed my bedroom door. I sat on the edge of my bed listening to the chaos through the door. Raised voices. Accusations. The sharp sound of someone, probably Richard Chen, demanding explanations Parker couldn't provide. The click of expensive heels as guests made their way to the elevator, already distancing themselves from the disaster they'd just witnessed. Kate knocked softly and slipped inside. That was the most incredible thing I've ever seen, she said, sitting beside me. Her hands were shaking slightly, adrenaline still coursing through her system. Parker's out there trying to explain, but nobody's listening. Half the investors have already left. The other half are threatening lawsuits. Sienna? Gone. She literally ran out crying about 15 minutes ago. I don't think she understood she was an accomplice until Monica said it out loud. Through the door, I could hear Parker's voice, desperate now, trying to salvage something. It's not what it looks like. She's manipulating the evidence. We can sit down and go through everything. You bought your mistress a condo with my money. That was David Martinez, his voice ice cold. I don't need to sit down for anything. I need to call my attorney. Kate pulled out her phone and showed me the screen. It's already online. Someone had uploaded footage from the party to multiple platforms. The view count was climbing visibly, hundreds becoming thousands as we watched. The video showed Parker's announcement, my calm response, and the moment the screens lit up with evidence of his crimes. How many people were recording? I asked. At least 20 that I could see. Maybe more. Kate scrolled through social media. It's spreading fast. People are calling it the most satisfying public revenge they've ever witnessed. My phone started buzzing. Texts from numbers I didn't recognize. Notifications from social media platforms I rarely used. Kate's phone was doing the same thing, lighting up repeatedly. You should probably turn that off for tonight, she said. This is going to get bigger before it dies down. Through the bedroom door, I heard the penthouse gradually emptying. Elevator chimes. Polite goodbyes that sounded strained. The caterers packing up in uncomfortable silence. Then Parker's voice, closer now. Carrie? Carrie, we need to talk. You can't just. Monica's voice cut him off. Mr. St. George, any communication with my client goes through me. I suggest you focus on finding yourself a very good attorney. Several of them, actually. You're going to need criminal defense counsel, a securities lawyer, and someone who specializes in investor disputes. This is insane. She's destroying my life over a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? Monica's voice could have frozen water. You committed securities fraud. You stole from your investors. You forged your wife's signature on financial documents. The only thing she destroyed was your ability to keep lying about it. Silence. Then footsteps retreating. Kate stayed with me for another hour, until the penthouse was completely quiet. When we finally emerged from the bedroom, the space looked like the aftermath of a party that had ended badly. Half-empty champagne glasses on every surface. Abandoned appetizers. The screen still frozen on the final slide of Monica's presentation. But Parker was gone. I walked through the rooms slowly, reclaiming my space. This was my home again. Not our penthouse. Not the stage for Parker's ambitions. Mine. Kate helped me clean up while I told her everything, the 3 months of investigation, the evidence gathering, the careful planning with Monica's team. You sat across from him at breakfast every morning knowing all of this? Kate asked, loading champagne glasses into the dishwasher. I had to. If I'd confronted him early, he would have had time to hide more assets, delete evidence, prepare a defense. I needed him confident. Needed him to execute his plan so everyone could see exactly who he was. My phone rang. Monica. How are you holding up? She asked. Surprisingly well. Is it really over? The party is over. The legal process is just beginning. I could hear satisfaction in her voice. But I've already received calls from 3 of Parker's investors. They want to know if you'd be willing to provide testimony about his financial practices. The civil suits are going to start Monday. And the SEC complaint? Filing first thing Monday morning, as planned. Anna's confident they'll launch a full investigation within the week. After we hung up, I stood at the glass wall that framed Manhattan, looking out at the city. 23 floors below, life continued normally. People going about their Saturday nights, unaware that somewhere above them, a marriage had ended and a life had been reclaimed. My phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. Please. We need to talk. I can explain everything. Don't do this to us. Parker. Still thinking there was an us to salvage. Still believing he could talk his way out of documented fraud. I blocked the number without responding. Another text, different number. Carrie, I'm sorry. I made mistakes but I love you. We can work through this. Blocked. A third number, you're destroying me over nothing. Over a relationship that didn't even mean anything. You're being vindictive and cruel. I showed that one to Kate, who laughed bitterly. He really thinks he's the victim here. He always did, I said, blocking the third number. That's why he felt entitled to everything, my home, my support, investor money, another woman. In his mind, he deserved it all. By midnight, Parker had tried reaching me from 7 different numbers. I blocked them all. Kate set up in the guest room. I didn't want to be alone that first night. We sat on my couch with wine and Chinese takeout, scrolling through the viral videos and watching Parker's reputation disintegrate in real time. Someone had edited together a shortened version focusing specifically on Parker's announcement, followed immediately by my counter-reveal. That version was spreading faster than the raw footage, set to dramatic music that heightened the emotional impact. The comments were overwhelmingly supportive. People praising my strategic patience. Mocking Parker's arrogance. Celebrating what they called the most satisfying reversal they'd seen. You're famous, Kate said, showing me a meme someone had created using the moment I thanked Parker for the divorce papers. I don't want to be famous, I said. I just want my life back. You got it, Kate replied. And you destroyed everyone who tried to take it from you. We stayed up until 3, talking through everything that had happened, processing the surreal reality that my marriage was over and Parker's empire was collapsing in real time across social media. When I finally went to bed, I slept better than I had in 2 years. Sunday morning, I woke up in my own bed with sunlight streaming through windows that finally felt like mine again. Kate was already up, making coffee in the kitchen. My phone was still off. I'd silenced it before going to sleep and wasn't ready to face whatever chaos waited there. Monica called on my phone, Kate said, handing me a mug. She wants to talk to you this morning. Said it's important. I called her back at 9. 3 major developments overnight, Monica said without preamble. First, Richard Chen and David Martinez have both pulled their investment from Parker's company effective immediately. They're demanding full audits and threatening to sue for return of funds plus damages. How fast can they do that? Very fast when there's documented fraud. Second development, Parker's board held an emergency meeting at midnight. They voted unanimously to suspend him as CEO pending investigation. His business partner Joel, the one who clapped him on the shoulder last night, is now publicly distancing himself, claiming he had no knowledge of the financial irregularities. I sat down at my kitchen counter, processing. Parker's company had been his entire identity. Everything he'd built over 6 years, gone in less than 12 hours. Third development, Monica continued, and this is the interesting one. Sienna Michaels contacted my office this morning. She wants to cooperate with the investigation. Apparently, she's realized she's facing potential fraud charges as an accomplice and she's willing to testify about Parker's activities in exchange for immunity. She's turning on him. Completely. She claims he told her the condo and the car were gifts from his personal funds, that she had no idea the money came from investors. Whether that's true or convenient, I don't know. But her testimony will be useful. Over the next week, I watched Parker's empire collapse in slow motion. Monday morning, Anna filed the SEC complaint. By Tuesday afternoon, federal investigators had contacted Parker's company requesting comprehensive financial records. Wednesday, 2 more investors filed civil suits seeking return of funds. Thursday, Parker's remaining board members held a press conference announcing his permanent removal as CEO and their full cooperation with federal investigators. Friday, exactly 1 week after the anniversary party, I met with Monica in her office to finalize divorce proceedings. He's willing to settle, Monica said, sliding papers across her desk. He knows he can't win at trial, and his legal team is advising him to minimize damages wherever possible. The settlement was everything we'd fought for. I kept the penthouse, legally it had always been mine, but now it was confirmed in writing that Parker had no claim whatsoever. I received half of all legitimate marital assets, plus compensation for the $197,000 he'd stolen from our joint accounts, plus reimbursement for every affair-related expense he'd charged to our shared credit cards. He's also agreed to pay your legal fees, Monica added with a small smile. All of them. Including my retainer, James's forensic work, Eric's investigation, and Anna's testimony preparation. How much are we talking? About $180,000 total. He's essentially funding the investigation that destroyed him. The divorce was finalized 6 weeks later. Judge Patricia Chin presided, a woman in her late 50s with a reputation for having no patience for financial fraud within marriages. Parker's attorney tried to argue that the viral video had created prejudice that made fair proceedings impossible. Judge Chin shut that down immediately. Your client committed documented fraud, she said, her voice sharp. Mrs. Walker simply made that fraud public. If he's facing consequences, they're consequences he earned through his own actions. I attended the hearing but didn't look at Parker once. He wasn't worth my attention anymore. The criminal investigation took longer. The SEC worked methodically, tracing every transaction, interviewing investors, building an airtight case. Anna's initial complaint had estimated $4.2 million in misappropriated funds. The final investigation found closer to $6.8 million over 4 years. 8 months after the anniversary party, Parker St. George was indicted on 14 counts of securities fraud, wire fraud, and investor deception. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I attended 2 days of testimony, sitting in the public gallery and watching prosecutors present evidence that built an overwhelming case. Sienna testified, looking small and pale on the witness stand, describing how Parker had used investor funds to buy her gifts while claiming the money was his. Joel Preston testified about financial practices he'd documented but felt powerless to stop. Forensic accountants explained the systematic nature of the fraud with charts and spreadsheets that made the jury members' expressions increasingly grim. Parker was convicted on 12 of the 14 counts. At sentencing, Judge Robert Michaels imposed 7 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. Additionally, Parker was ordered to pay $6.8 million in restitution to defrauded investors, plus penalties and fines that would likely occupy the remainder of his professional life. I attended the sentencing because Monica believed closure required witnessing consequences in their entirety. Parker stood behind the defense table wearing a suit that no longer fit properly, his face showing the accumulated stress of 9 months fighting charges that evidence had proven conclusively. When Judge Michaels asked if he wanted to make a statement, Parker looked directly at me for the first time since his arrest. "I confused success with worth," he said, his voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. "I thought having more meant being more. I destroyed everything real in my life chasing something that was never going to make me happy." He paused. Carrie deserved better. She was better. And I was too arrogant to see it. The words might have meant something years earlier. Now they were just insufficient acknowledgement delivered far too late to matter. I felt nothing watching him be led away. Not satisfaction. Not vindication. Not even the closure people talk about finding at the end of difficult chapters. Just profound relief that I was finally done living in his story. That evening, I stood in my penthouse, truly mine now, legally and emotionally, with 23 floors of unobstructed skyline stretching before me. I'd redecorated completely over the past months. Removed every piece of furniture Parker had chosen, every compromise we'd made. The space reflected only my taste now. Art I genuinely loved. Furniture that served comfort rather than impression. Books on shelves because I wanted to read them, not because they looked intellectual. I'd been promoted at work, creative director with a 45% salary increase. My boss had been direct about the reason, someone capable of executing strategy that comprehensive clearly has valuable professional skills we want to utilize. For the first time in years, I was earning money that was unambiguously mine, unconnected to anyone else's ambitions or expenditures. I'd adopted a cat. A gray imperious creature I named Justice because Kate suggested it and the irony appealed to me. He spent his days in patches of sunlight, occasionally acknowledging my presence when food suited his convenience. Monica had become more than my attorney. She'd become a friend who understood what it meant to rebuild after watching something collapse. She introduced me to a monthly group, women with similar stories about partners who'd systematically underestimated them. We shared experiences and strategies, building community based on survival rather than shared victimhood. The viral video still circulated occasionally, resurfacing whenever someone compiled examples of public accountability. I no longer felt exposed by it. Instead, it had become permanent proof that quiet people aren't weak people, they're simply waiting for the right moment to demonstrate exactly how dangerous underestimation can be. Standing at my windows that evening, 11 months after the anniversary party, I understood something fundamental. Parker had wanted to upgrade. What he'd actually done was trade partnership for performance, someone who knew him completely for someone who knew only the version he performed for public consumption. The real upgrade had been mine. From wife defined by marriage to woman defined by choices. From someone who absorbed criticism about inadequacy to someone who recognized that inadequacy belonged to the person delivering judgment. I raised my wine glass to my reflection in the darkening windows, to the woman who'd been patient enough to build an airtight case, strategic enough to wait for the perfect moment, and strong enough to reclaim everything that was rightfully hers. Justice jumped onto the windowsill beside me, his gray fur silvered by city lights. I scratched behind his ears and looked out at Manhattan spread below, millions of lives, millions of stories, most of them never going viral, never becoming internet moments. But this one had. And every time it resurfaced, every time someone shared that video of Parker's confident announcement followed by his absolute destruction, it served as a reminder. Parker thought quiet meant weak. Thought patience meant passive. Thought I'd just accept whatever he decided to do with my life, my home, my future. He learned the difference between quiet and weak. The hard way. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.